My landlord nightmare coming up next. Hey, this is Yamo, the Section 8 Sensei. Today we are going to go through a not so happy story about a tenant that kind of destroyed one of our properties, and wanted to kind of go through that with you. And before we do that, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel. It's completely free. Turn on your notifications and kind of go through a process here that may make you want to kill your tenant, but it's going to be transparent either way. So in the comments below, let me know if you guys have ever had a property that got destroyed by a tenant and kind of what happened in your situation. And then you can kind of compare it to the situation that happened with us. We used to actually have, when we used to do flips and stuff like that, we used to, back in the day, we used to buy these properties that a lot of them were trustee sale foreclosures from these wholesale companies. And I mean, we would have stuff like, we had one property one time we had, and I mean, there literally were holes in the walls where they used to stash their drugs. And I mean, it was just off the rails. So you never know how people are going to live, but let me know in the comment section what your horror story has been. And then we can kind of compare it to ours, which probably is going to be pretty minor in the greater scheme of things. So one of the things we want to do in the channel is this is kind of the day in the life of me. I mean, technically, so from the mortgage side, landlord side, however you want to look at it. So, you know, not everything is perfect. So we want to kind of go through everything that happens to us because it's life, right? Life is real. Not everything goes according to plan. So one of the things we want to always do is kind of be transparent and fluid with our communication to let you guys know, hey, you know, good things, bad things, all this stuff happens. So this is kind of the story of a property that was purchased in last year, and we got a tenant pretty quick. It's in a great part of town. It's a great property, 4-bedroom, 3-bath, really well taken care of property when we purchased it, and wasn't completely renovated or anything, but it was, you know, I've talked to you guys before about, you know, with rentals, look, clean, functional, and dated is okay, right? We're not living there. We're not doing all this stuff. So not everything has to be perfectly renovated. It just has to be able to pass inspection and be able to be functional and safe and clean to do it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of show you some pictures of where we started so that you guys can have kind of a reference point on the type of property we have, what it looked like. You can kind of get a visual of kind of where we started. All right, so this is the property. It's a townhouse format, so we're the kind of that middle unit there from the outside. Nothing really crazy. And again, we have neighbors on both sides. This is has an HOA, so you're talking about the roof, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so here's kind of the inside of the house. Again, a little bit dated, but you know, clean in format. The people who owned it were super, super nice, very clean. You know, took care of the property well over the years. So, you know, just kind of a standard, you know, interior. Obviously, this is the pictures that they had up on MLS at the time. So you can kind of see how it's a little bit older, but based on the location and the size of the property, you know, it worked for us. We knew our rent numbers were going to be good. This was a Section 8 client that we put in there. You know, so we did everything right according to the plan as far as what we wanted to get, who we were putting in, how much our rent was guaranteed, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, you can see, I mean, this is a pretty well taken care of property. It was clean. They took care of it, or, you know, at least they picked up their stuff and vacuumed before they took the pictures, however you want to look at it. But, you know, there's no holes in the wall or anything like that. Everything is, seems to be functional. The inspection was clean when we did it. There wasn't really a lot on it at all. So we were pretty good on all the main stuff, water heaters, AC units. This was a townhouse, so the HOA covers all the exterior maintenance, roof, you know, siding, landscaping, things like that. So we don't, in that situation, we're not getting really wrapped around the axle about those types of things because they're not anything that's covered. So it's got a nice backyard, patio, you know. So this kind of gives you an idea of kind of where we started with all this. Had a double carport, has the gate in the back, community pool. Okay, So all that stuff kind of is the beginning and kind of gives you an idea of where we started. So I want everybody to be optimistic, positive, excited, and all that when you go into rental properties and being a landlord and being an investor. It's all great, okay? And you read a lot about it. There's tax benefits. There's this, there's that. There's whatever. So these are all great, but we also want to be realistic, right? This is not it's kind of like, hey, my stock is going to go from $100 to $200 a share. All right. Or interest rates are going to drop from 7 to 2. Okay, great. Well, whatever's happening is not going to go in a straight line. Okay. Meaning you're not going to buy the house today for $100,000. It's going to be worth $500,000 in 3 years. There's never going to be any problems. You're never going to have any rental tenant issues. You're not going to have any expenses. There's going to be no repairs. That's just not realistic. Okay. So, I want everybody to be, like I said, positive about it, but also be realistic of the types of things that can happen, right? Just it's a business, all right? And every business has challenges. Every business has obstacles. Every business has, things that go better than expected and things that go worse than expected. So, it's kind of like, you own a car wash and the car wash, machine breaks, or you own my kids own a shoe store. Sometimes they buy shoes at the wrong price in the market and then they can't get rid of them or they lose money on them. I mean, it happens. It's the cost of doing business. I used to coach football, and I remember when, I put these plays together, and I was coaching little kids at one point in time when my kids were younger, so everything misdirection kind of works. And, because kids just follow with their eyes when they're 10. So, we put these plays together and then you get to the practice field and, you're like, okay, this is great. This is going to work pretty good. You line up and you go, okay, guys, here's the play. Here's what everybody does. You're like, this is going to be the best. It's going to be a touchdown. Nobody's going to get touched. And then I got 2 linemen running into each other. I got the quarterback trips on a waterhead sprinkler. My tailback trips on a blade of grass. And it's just a disaster. And they're like, okay, we have to adjust. We can't run that in a game. And so it's kind of the same thing, on the real estate front. So let's take a look at a couple things here. Just like I said, just more reality checks and expectations than anything else. All right, so rental properties are great when they're rented. Have no doubt. Those are the best types of scenarios. You have income coming in. Hopefully you have greater than expenses coming out, and it's a good deal, okay? It's when you have the unexpected that happens and you have unexpected expenses, something happens with your roof, your water heater, your air conditioner, whatever, or something else happens maybe with the tenant. Okay. And I know everybody goes in here, which, hey, I'm going to be rich. But this is not a sprint. Okay. This is like a marathon to get there. So just want to kind of notate those things and, not put the rose colored glasses on to think that everything is going to be perfect at all times. And, want to make sure that we're realistic about what our expectations are. When it comes to being a landlord, you can only control what you can control. So you make the best decisions you can, just kind of like in life. You're going to make the best decisions you can with the amount of information and the quality of information that you have at the current time, right? So nobody knows that a tenant is going to be bad. Nobody knows that there's going to be a non-payment. Nobody knows the air conditioner is going to fall off the roof or whatever happens to be. So we can only do what we can do as it relates to some of the things that we're in control of. So we definitely just want to absorb all the information that's available, make the best decision that we can for our business, and try to move forward from there. But the realities of some of these things, we want to take in as noted, so that we can kind of adjust accordingly. So the reality is, and we know this happens in life, happens in sports, it happens in whatever. I mean, shit happens essentially. So we all are going to have to adapt at one point or another to try to get from point A to point B. Okay. We all have a plan. The plans sound great, but what we don't account for is the unexpected. Okay. So they always say expect the unexpected. It's kind of the same thing, with real estate. We are going to have to adapt and conquer and, get past some objections and obstacles in order to get our business to be positive and thrive in the long run, and overcome some adversity. It's going to happen to everybody, whether it's something with the PHA, the tenant, the property, an expense, right? A repair, whatever it is. That's why when we go out and we identify these properties, the spread number is super, super important because it gives you a buffer and a little bit of leniency on if something happens. Now, if you're looking at one particular property and your spread is $200 or $300, it doesn't sound like that's a lot. But as you start to scale this plan and start to look at it, and let's say you have 5 or 10 properties and that spread is $3,000 to $5,000 a month, it's a much bigger buffer over time. Okay, so as it gets bigger and bigger, obviously there's more risk, but you don't expect all 10 air conditioners to go out at once. So it gives you a little bit of support and a floor, so to speak, to be able to sustain some of those things. All right, so let's get to what everybody really wants to see is how jacked my property actually is. So we all know misery loves company, so let's just go at it this way. If you guys have ever had a tenant destroy a property of yours, let me know in the comments below and let me know what kind of damage number you were dealing with. I think everybody that's had properties over a long period of time has probably experienced this to some degree. So let me know what happened to you guys, because I'm about to tell you how we got freaking lambasted on this puppy and kind of what we're doing to recover. Okay, so let me give you the kind of the groundwork of what happened here. So we were heading toward the end of a lease. We started to have some problems. The tenant had some issues between jobs and whatnot, and so there were a couple of changes to her rent responsibility number through the PHA, and so we're getting kind of in a we're heading down the home stretch basically to have this lease end, and so we're just trying to kind of keep the peace, not go through a massive eviction situation, because as we'll talk about later, there's some exchange to that when you go down that road. So again, just trying to hold the fort down and try to get to the end. Trying not to have any craziness happen. But in this case, there were some family problems and some other issues that were going on, and so. This is kind of what I walked into once. So I actually went to make sure that they were out because they lasted a few extra days or whatever. And again, it wasn't really worth the eviction part at the time to go through that for a couple of days once I knew they would get out voluntarily. So I had gone the night before all this happened. So these photos I'm going to show you were taken the day after. And I asked specifically, I said, hey, whatever you're taking, they had the moving truck there, take it, whatever you're not taking, throw it away. Don't leave me a bunch of stuff. We've been pretty lenient with her on some things and worked with her to help her stay, in the property until she could get a new place and whatnot. So, but anyway, so I went the night before, requested that. I said, okay, leave me the keys, whatever. And so what I'm going to show you next is basically what I found the next day. All right, so I want you to vividly remember the photos I showed you and how nice the house was when we started, okay? And this is, listen, if you got small children watching the video, you may want to put them to sleep right now because this is going to get you a little bit discombobulated. So this is what I walked into, and this is the day after. So this is after they moved. So all of this that you're seeing right now is what was left behind. So clearly the instruction of throw your shit away before you leave went in one ear and out the frickin' other. So I had stuff everywhere. I had closet doors that were off the rails. Nothing had been clean. Now, here's the scary part about this, okay? There were kids in this property. Not that anybody should live this way, but you're talking about kids being in this property. And up until the night before, which clearly all this shit didn't happen 12 hours or whatever, people were sleeping here and people lived here. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know how you guys live, but mercy sakes alive. This thing probably had not been cleaned in at least 3 to 6 months. I just don't see how you can get this effed up, otherwise. But again, this was all that was left behind. So they took whatever actually made the cut, and all of this was just left behind, and again, people were living here. I mean, they were sleeping here, you know, and I mean, I really don't have words for it, to be honest with you, but this is more just, you know, land, that's his personal stuff. But yeah, as you can see, this thing was a little foobarred as we go through it, and it was not at all good. So, I mean, the damage numbers are ripping through here, and we'll kind of go over the economics of what repercussions this had on us. Obviously, the fridge looks solid. I don't know what in the hell was going on in there. Okay, so all those little dots there, just for those of us, I know the picture wasn't perfectly clear because whatever it was on my iPhone decided to focus on the freaking water bottle. But all of those things are like cockroaches. So like little ones, okay? You know, there was food lying around all over the place. Obviously the trail out the gate at the parking lot, like all of that stuff, those are cockroaches. I mean, I don't know what they were doing on the back patio, but that's all like grease, like the black part there. I mean, clearly you can see that this was no bueno, okay? That's my screen for one of the windows, by the way, just side note. You can see the grease part that's on the, you know, on the deal. I mean, this is just wrong in more ways than I can explain. Yeah, so there's, you know, Tom and Jerry, the two cockroach guys, family members to follow. You know, just left shit everywhere, basically. That, for those of you maybe who are looking on your phones, that is raw shrimp on my kitchen floor. Now, I don't know if most of you know kind of what Phoenix weather is like in May, but it's not really conducive to live, you know, raw shrimp on the floor in the property. I don't know what happened over here, but all those little dots on the ground, like I said, those are all cockroaches, the little dots. So that's not dirt. Those are cockroaches. If I remember right, that's a rotisserie chicken in the bottom left there. Got some hot dogs on the right, a couple potatoes, might be a red pepper in the bag. And again, the dots are the cockroaches. I think I mentioned that. There's a close-up of the potatoes. Another dot on the wall. Friendly foe. Clearly did not clean up very well on the stove front. Nice floor. And more shit everywhere in the house. Okay, so you can kind of see, you get the gist. This was not a good deal. Kind of looks like a property that you would buy when you went to foreclosure. So, all right. So now we're going to take a look at kind of what happened monetarily on this front, but just kind of wanted to give you an idea what I was walking into so you can have some sympathy for me. All right. All right. I know most of you enjoyed that. That was good times for me, but anyway, it happens sometimes and you have to kind of adjust. So what I want to go through with you, and as bad as that all sounded and looks and feels and all of these things, I do want to go through with you kind of what happened on the finance part of this. So you saw what happened in the reality, and then you're talking about the time, the effort, and everything else that happens. But let's kind of walk through what happened on paper, so to speak, so you guys can kind of get a feel for what this looked like. You know, and we're fluid and transparent here. Okay, I mean, much like we just talked about, not everything is perfect. So, you know, I need to share with you the bad things as well as the good things, and then, you know, you guys can make decisions on if you have the temperament to deal with this or not, or if you maybe should have us as a partner to deal with it. But anyway, let's take a look at kind of what happened on the finance side. All right, so we started on this property because it was big. It was a 4-bedroom, so we had almost $3,200 in security deposit. The damages, once it was all done, now we had obviously some late fees and some other types of things that were deducted out of the $3,198 to begin with, so we didn't have quite that much in the net to play with. But there was another almost $5,000 in additional damage to the property that we had issues with. Remember, all of this took basically 60 days, so then I'm losing $3,200 in rent on top of it. So that's not a good thing because we don't have a renewal obviously in place or a new tenant. Okay. Now, when you deal with, every state's going to be a little different, but you can file, so if you lose money or they exceed their security deposit and there's money owed, you can do an eviction. And don't think of the eviction as I'm removing them from the property. It's more of a legal process term because obviously they're not in the property anymore, but you can file an eviction procedure, process, whatever you want to call it, which is basically like a legal action to recover the damages. Now, remember, you may not even need to, go through the whole legal eviction process because the tenant, once they are aware, they need to pay that or work something out, or they could lose their voucher. So there's two things that you have over their head. Number one is, are they going to lose the voucher they currently have? Because if they violate a lease or get evicted on a lease for any reason, they're going to lose their voucher from the PHA. So there's that. The second part is if they actually go through that process and that happens and they have an eviction on their record, they may never be able to get anybody to rent to them in the short term, right? While that's on there. Because obviously if I'm a landlord and I see that somebody has an eviction, that they just left, why do I want them as a tenant? Okay. Now, here's the kind of an interesting part, and this is kind of where you need to ask a lot of questions and get really close to your housing authorities or housing agencies, is that we were super fortunate because we happened to be in a city that had just started a program to try to encourage more landlords to participate in the Section 8 voucher, okay? So what they did is they had a $2,500 landlord protection fund in place. So if you could document that there were damages done to your property that weren't there at the beginning, blah, 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 you could tap into this fund as a reimbursement for those expenses that you paid. So that was, obviously a super important thing in our situation. So again, sometimes this stuff happens, and you have to just move on and recover from it and hopefully it doesn't happen again. And ultimately in the long game, in the short game, it sucked. It wasn't good. But in the long game, it's probably not going to make a difference. If we can avoid this situation moving forward, and we're fortunate and have good tenants and all these types of things, we'll recover the money over time. But it does happen, and when it happens, it's not good. So this is why you need the spread, and it's also why you need some reserves as you go into these things. You can't go into these, investments or whatever and have $4 in your pocket. It doesn't work. Okay, you have to have some buffer, so to speak, to make sure that you can sustain a hit like this if something were to happen. Ideally, it never happens, but if it does, you got to be prepared for it. So like I said, we were out for a window of time to get all of these things done in addition to, the cost itself. So let's kind of take a peek at kind of what happened here. All right, so like we talked about, we were out of service for the 2 months. It literally took us 60 days. Really, the biggest problem was not the cleanup, it was the extermination. So because they had so much, food and filth and dirt and all sorts of nonsense going on in there, we had a ton of problems with, bugs, which then led to the neighbor and, all this other stuff. So that was really, tough on us was the time. So, we had our cleaning crew go in there probably 3 different times. We had, pest control do the big extermination a couple times. We were blowing those smoke bomb things inside the property, every couple of days. We were spraying for stuff. We had to seal the whole house down so we could kind of contain what the problem was. So, in these older properties, you start looking under the cabinets and looking in door seals and all that. Sometimes you have to reseal everything so there's no entry point back into the property. So we really had to seal it down, which probably in hindsight was a good thing, to help with, and then you have the carpet cleaners and all that kind of stuff going on. So It's a lot, and it was a big project, but we're fortunate and blessed that we're past it now and able to somewhat move forward. Now, I know some of you guys are looking at this and saying, okay, well, you're an idiot. How did you not know this was happening and whatever? So let's kind of talk about the psychology of what we're dealing with here. So a couple of things happen in here. So we do spot checks on the property, and usually we do them like every 90 days. And this was a situation where, they're kind of going through their thing, and this wasn't a year-long problem. This is a situation where the tenant had some things happen to them, and it was really within like the last 90 days. Okay. And so when that happens, we know we've got a lease expiration coming up, let's say, within 60 or 90 days. So at that point, by the time you run eviction and do all those things, it could be about that time anyway. So our psychology in that situation was can we just make it to the expiration, get them out, and then we'll deal with it. Because remember, if you start filing eviction proceedings on a tenant and then that notifies PHA, they'll stop your money, right? So we're like, well, I don't really want to lose, $3,200 while we vote her off the island to save 60 days. And we already know we're going to have a cleanup situation, and then what if we lose 4 months of revenue? So it's a little bit of a cat and mouse that you play to try to make the best decision. Is it going to get any worse in the last 60 days than it is the last time we saw it, where it was starting to go downhill? And if we have the same problem either way, we might as well not lose $6,400 in the process, was kind of the psychology. Now, I don't know if that was a good idea or a bad idea, but I think where we ended up, we were going to end up regardless. So we didn't want to, kind of lose rent on top of it. So that was kind of the psychology of, why we held on, is because we were so close to the end of the lease and we knew we were starting to have problems because of the spot checks. And so we were checking like every 2 to 4 weeks at that point. But we just needed to get the tenant out at that point. And once we got there, then we could deal with kind of the repercussions of what was left. All right. So there's a couple of things that we do, to kind of maintain things as we go. We keep a maintenance log. We also do spot checks, and, you have to give them notice. And, obviously you're not living with them. So you just try to pick up things as they come, try to get them straightened out, let them know that, we want them to know that we know that they know we know we're looking at them. You know what I mean? So it's not just a free for all. So, and this was not a problem, just so you guys know, this is not a problem that happened, all through the course of the lease. This is kind of something that happened in probably the last 3 to 4 months leading up to the end. Now I want to remind you of something. If you go in a Section 8 scenario and you report a violation, essentially, to the PHA or the housing specialist, so, and this is kind of the balance. Remember, I was telling you, hey, we were just trying to get to the finish line. So if I go out and I say, hey, Mrs. Tenant or Mr. Tenant is not keeping the property up to speed, and I report a violation to the PHA, they will send an inspector out. They'll do all those things. But if the tenant is involved in any sort of violation for either non-payment or keeping the property up, or, whatever the case may be, they will violate that. That's looked at from PHA as a violation of the lease. So when they say, hey, we have a violation, a flag goes up in the frickin' air, and, they put a hold on the money that PHA is responsible for to us. So if you have a $3,200 deal and they're responsible for 70% of it or whatever, I'm going to put $2,000 on hold, right, while we sort this violation out. So you got to be very careful about, at first we were like, oh yeah, man, they're here to protect us. We're just going to blow the whistle every time, there's lint on the floor. And then the first time we were like, hey man, where's our money? And they're like, oh, well, we had this violation. We're trying to sort it out. And it occurred to us pretty quickly. Wait a second. If we report any sort of violation, our money's going to stop. And a lot of times if the guaranteed portion coming from the city is 70, 80, 90%, and you know what I mean? So now you have to weigh your cost benefit relationship on when you're going to blow the whistle versus how you're going to work it out with the tenant on your own. So anyway, so I just kind of wanted to show you guys that it happens. It's not fun when it happens. I probably used more colorful words with my partner than I'm using with you guys, but you get kind of the gist of what could transpire on that. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful. I don't know if helpful is the right word, or informative is probably a better word, because after seeing that, you're like, shit, I'm never owning rental property. This is some bullshit. So, but this is the exception, not the rule. I mean, we have other properties with tenants, and they're all great. This part never happens. Or if we see something in an inspection, we'll say, hey, you need to fix this shit, and they'll straighten themselves out, for the next spot check. So just letting them know that there's eyes on it is important. So hopefully that was informative for you. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like the video, forward it to, I don't know. I don't know if you want to forward this one or not. But anyway, we appreciate the support on the channel. And if you have any questions on this stuff or just want to make fun of me, leave a comment below, or contact me directly or whatever if you have some questions, if you're going through something like this. And we'll see you on the next one.